Welcome to The Grey Area, the podcast where we unpack the forces shaping insurance, risk, and claims behind the scenes. Now, the cost of claims are increasing not because losses are getting larger, they're increasing because society is paying a lot more. In today's episode, we talk about social inflation backed by real global data, real claims outcomes, and also what it means for us here in South Africa. So let's get into it. Now, social inflation refers to the increase of claims costs faster than economic inflation. And this is usually driven by litigation trends, litigation funding, expanding interpretation of liability, cultural expectation, and jury sentiment. Now, Swiss Re has reported a 20-year high of 7% in 2023, which means that social inflation outweighs economic inflation and is the largest driver in terms of casualty claims severity globally. Now, what is the major contributor? These are actually nuclear verdicts. Nuclear verdicts are those verdicts in excess of $100 million US. In 2023, $2,700 million verdicts were actually recorded. In 2024, $135 million US verdicts. This is a significant increase in terms of the verdicts that have actually been awarded. This is no longer rare, it's actually structural. So in terms of social inflation, as mentioned earlier, Swiss Re had a significant increase, and that is a 52% year-on-year increase. Now let's look at some real case examples. Cases that come to mind, for example, are the commercial auto case. In this case, basically, what could have been a claim that could have been settled for $50,000 was actually settled for $25 million. The factors driving this type of decision was basically relating to moral responsibility, ethical thinking, and judgment. Another case is the industrial fatality case. In this case, there was an award of $44.3 million that was actually awarded. This was later reduced, however, this was still on the higher end. The next case is the employee injury case, where two employees were awarded $464 million US. Of that $464 million, $440 was in respect of punitive damages. We're now starting to see how emotional damages and punitive damages are starting to comprise or make up a significant amount of the verdicts. So $440 million was the amount that was awarded in terms of this component. What we are now seeing in terms of these types of verdicts, that is more about emotion, storytelling, and cultural expectations that is actually moving away from technical valuations. So as we think of like social inflation comes, right, we know that it's an accelerating trend.
Yeah.
Any other figures that measure it?
Okay, so US jury awards increased up to 4 times in the last 5 years. The average US jury award now is about $16.2 million US dollars, where about 5 years ago it was about $4 million.
Yeah.
And then, for instance, Swiss Re has added $3 billion in extra reserves due to the unpredictability of liability and casualty claims. So you can see that social inflation really has had a measurable effect.
Yeah.
Well, I say measurable, but you can't really measure it. It's kind of like it's kind of like a thumb suck at the end of the day because of the unpredictability factor of social inflation. But definitely it has had an impact if insurers are having to take such drastic measures to kind of accommodate the social inflation factors.
And I think another thing when you speak about unpredictability is that you're more likely to see a significant number of those cases being settled that are going to trial to be settled beforehand,
yeah.
Because now you are worried about those unpredictable outcomes.
Exactly. Because you rather know this is what I'm willing to do than have to go to trial and then get an adverse award for an amount that may be 10 times what the claim is actually worth.
And I think also another factor is also the cost that you spend in preparing for trial, and legal costs are quite excessive.
Yeah.
And what if you need experts? So that's additional.
Yes, on top of an unpredictable award. Okay, so now at the beginning you gave us a bit of an overview of what social inflation really is, but let's unpack it a bit and see exactly what are social inflation trends. So as I understand it, social inflation is this phenomenon whereby certain factors which are not set in stone affect verdicts? And what are those factors?
I think one of them, and what has been a fascinating one for me, has been that play on emotion, right? Because earlier we mentioned it's about emotion taking away the technical valuation of that actual claim.
So the sympathetic judge.
The sympathetic judge, and also cultural expectations, societal expectations, right? Because I think if anything now we live in an age where people have a lot of access to information.
Yeah.
It's so simple. You can go onto Meta AI on WhatsApp and ask for settlements in terms of slip and trips.
Yeah.
For example, in South Africa, and it'll give you a whole list. So, for example, in America, how they played on emotion, and this is such an interesting theory. It's called the reptile theory.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you heard of that, right? So basically how it works, so this is a litigation strategy used by the plaintiff's attorneys to appeal to the jury's fears and instincts.
Okay.
Right? And this, in that sense, provokes or produces an outcome where they award more damages.
Yeah.
So it's stated, so the fascinating thing about it is this theory is based on the fact that our most primal part of the brain is actually our reptilian brain, which is responsible for your fears and instincts.
Yes.
And is actually triggered by the fact that, or anything that actually creates some kind of insecurity or a threat to safety. So this is playing out in those type of things. So it's to instill that instill that fear in the public, and also to say, hey, this is a statement of warning. You break the rules, irrespective of how minor it is. We actually going to now give an award to basically say, this is our stance on the matter. You break the rules, you need to be safer. So it plays out in medical malpractice, for example, where a doctor doesn't actually follow his protocol. That creates harm to, that could appeal to a juror's sense of harm.
Yeah.
Another one is product liability. We've in South Africa had a lot of product liability claims. Now, example, a defective design, inadequate warning.
Yeah.
That compromises the safety of the public.
Yes.
What about property owners in the public liability space if you're not keeping your premises safe?
Yeah.
So it's those type of things now that have become so emotionally driven in terms of their expectations and the way judges and courts are influenced.
And I think that it is important to take those factors into account, because you can't always go. It's very important to do things by the rules, right?
Yeah.
And it gives some structure and some kind of a modicum probably of fairness. But sometimes when you go too much on the side of erring by the book, you lose some of that human touch, that human nature. And I think that's where probably social inflation is beneficial.
100%, but also we're living in an evolved society where principles of fairness and justice are popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
For example, if you think now, we've just touched on the USA, but it's not just restricted to the USA, because you look at countries like Australia, for example. There's a whole change in terms of the societal point of view around these awards.
But what do you think drove that? COVID?
I think it could be COVID as well. I think
it could be, because I think social inflation has only come into play a lot more since COVID happened.
But also I think it's, if you're touching on COVID, I think one of the biggest glaring things of COVID was it touched on inequality in society.
Yes.
Who has access to what?
Exactly.
And if you think of South Africa, we have quite an evolved legal system.
Yes.
And our constitution is based on the principles of the right to dignity, access to justice, and I think that's something that fuels it even further.
Yeah. Okay, so the one factor was the sympathetic judge, the sympathetic jury. What are other factors that are driving social inflation? What about litigation funding?
Litigation funding is a big thing, right? And if you take a look at it in the context of South Africa, we have a large commercial sector. But also
what is litigation funding?
Okay, so basically litigation funding is when you've got a third-party funder that comes in and is willing to fund your litigation for you.
Yeah.
It's basically a system which allows maybe a victim or a plaintiff an opportunity to proceed with a meritorious claim without having had the financial burden, and they in return receive a bit of those proceeds in return.
And litigation funders probably target class action type scenarios where there are multiple claimants that have a case against one particular company or one particular entity arising out of possibly one particular event, right? So, for instance, listeriosis claims. if there's a litigation funder that would fund a whole lot of claims for a whole lot of claimants against one particular organization, and as you said, those people cannot afford to the legal cost themselves, so these people, the litigation funders, come in and do that. So why is that a social inflation factor?
Because
how does that increase the cost of claims?
Because think about it. If you have someone proceeding with claims, you're going to increase your claims frequency, right?
Yes.
And where there's a claim and there's a cost involved, that's going to drive up your claims costs.
Yeah.
And then you also got some litigation funders that actually may want to litigate, because then they're getting a return on a larger return on the investment.
And litigation funders focus on claims that are high frequency, first of all, and also high severity. So they're going to go for the claims where these huge awards are going to be handed out. So that is another thing I think that is increasing the cost of claims. Whereas you had claimants before that couldn't necessarily afford to proceed with their action. Now these claimants are there and they've got deep pockets. Because sometimes even a claimant would start with a claim but not be able to take it to fruition. Because sometimes when you're acting against a large or corporation or organization, they have deeper pockets to defend you until you run out of money, right? But now you've got Big Brother behind you that's funding you. You can take it a little bit further than probably you were able to in the past.
And I think the nice thing about litigation funding, those agreements are usually on a non-recourse basis. So basically, you as the person, the recipient of the assistance, you don't have to pay anything back unless there's a successful outcome where they get a chunk of the award.
Okay.
So it works for a man on the street that has a valid claim. And also, if you look at the bigger picture, it does promote that access to justice, right?
Access to justice, yeah.
And what is our constitution based on?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very different from the US. I mean, how often have we come across the particulars of claim? And in the particulars of claim, you note the violation of my dignity as impaired or something or the other.
Yeah.
You see it so often.
Yeah, of course.
So, Kams, we've mentioned like US, we've actually brought in the figures from the US. What about our local position? What's happening on
I think the probably way we can look at it is RAF cases.
Yeah.
It seems like social inflation has affected RAF cases to the point where the claims are exceeding 2 million now.
Yeah.
And then I would say medical malpractice claims.
Yes.
What would you say about?
Because I think also we've always known with medical malpractice, I mean, that's why a lot of insurers prefer to stay away from medical malpractice given the losses and the severity of the losses, right?
Yeah.
So you've got a situation where the Department of Health is sitting with major contingent liabilities in excess of 120 billion.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, billion.
Yeah, wow.
And if you think about it, also, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, we've seen CP baby cases, that's cerebral palsy claims. I mean, and those awards or settlements have been like in the region of 25 to 30 million. So a single claim can be quite excessive.
It's interesting, and I wonder why this is, that nuclear verdicts were kind of alive and happening in the USA many years ago. But why? I'm very interested to wonder why bigger verdicts are only reaching our shores now.
But again, I think it's also our system allows for access to justice. And I think, again, it's that access to information. People are more aware of their rights more than ever.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've seen, for example, you've seen some attorneys, whilst it's regulated, you've seen attorneys advertising for these things.
Yeah.
I mean, to get information on certain situations, it's so much easier these days. And I think there's a lot more advocacy around rights and fairness and justice. And if someone's been harmed, there is someone that's willing to actually take on the cause.
And there's consequences, I think, now. I think probably, whereas in the past those consequences were not there, now there are kind of ESG factors that needed to be taken into consideration that gives corporate accountability, that gives accountability to a lot of institutions or a lot of I would say professionals, or not even professional industries, that there is that sense of accountability, and kind of you just can't, it's just not David versus Goliath anymore. The Davids have a bit more a bit more backing.
They do. And I think, again, it advocates for that where you've done harm. You need to account for it.
You need to account for it, yeah.
And, we always tend to think, okay, we in South Africa, if something happens across the sea, we just leave it there. But it does have a way of sometimes trickling on our shores.
But I also think you can't take it too far. I mean, your award should be commensurate, right? To what commensurate to what the actual injury is, and to what your probable damages are going to be in the future. It can't just be a case where you're getting an unreasonable amount of money.
Yeah.
So I mean, where do you draw the balance there?
But I think that's where it comes in with the expertise and the skill.
Yeah.
You need to have the right people on the matter. So whether you're in an insurer, you need to make sure that your claims specialist, as an example, is hands-on on that matter, that you have a strategy, because strategy is so important. Because far too often, you work on a matter, then only later down the line do you realize, oh, kebab, something's happening. Now we need to be more reactive.
Yeah.
You need to be, as a claims specialist, in the line there of that fire, trying to see what is the strategy. You need to understand.
But it's stressful. I think social inflation is a huge stressor for claim specialists. I remember I had this claim. It used to keep me up at night. And by the book, the answer was there. The answer was that the insured was not liable, right? But you would always think of the social inflation factor that came into account, where you would think that, but the judge is going to feel sorry for this person. And ultimately the judge did feel sorry for that person. So at the back of your mind, this is going to happen. I can't control the outcome. It's not just about interpreting the law. It's not just about interpreting the precedent. It's not just about what happened in the past is going to happen again. Even though by the book and by the letter you have the stronger case, at the end of the day, when you look at the situation holistically, there's a bigger burden or a bigger onus placed upon a professional person or an industry or a company or a body than is what is placed on the layperson.
That's true. It's quite. I think it would be something that's quite tricky to navigate through. But you could, like you said, you're going to have to consider all angles.
Yeah.
Do you proceed with a matter to trial and then end up with an adverse judgment and then still end up with a cost?
And I mean, I think we've touched on this in previous episodes, but as the evolving claim specialist, you can't be that ostrich head in the sand anymore. You have to be very alive as to not just what's happening in your industry, but what the public sentiment is, what's happening in the world at large. Because if you're not in tune with those type of things, you're going to end up with very under-reserved claims.
They're 100%, and that's going to affect the company's bottom line at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And like you said, you have to be in tune with not just what's happening here, but everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like reading a room.
It's like reading the entire world.
You have a magic ball and see. But I think that's exactly it. Awareness is important, because think about it. You're facing a community that's becoming so aware of what they can and cannot do now. So you can't be on the back foot not being aware of like what's actually going on there or how the world views, because it is a global shift in terms of thinking.
Yeah.
And I think, like, if you think about it, it's very rights-based now.
Yes. As it should be.
And I mean, fairness, do no harm. I mean, we've seen judgments, for example, like Shell. I mean, for the matter in Nigeria, they were taken to task. But the thing was, it doesn't matter where you are. You're going to be held to account. Do no harm.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so we're still talking in the South African context. What else could be driving social inflation locally? What about constitutional rights?
That's a big thing.
Yeah.
I mean, like I've mentioned earlier, our system is different to the US.
Yeah.
We have the constitution that advocates for those rights.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see more of those type of things appearing and happening.
Okay, let's talk about constitutional damages. Let's dive into the deep end and talk about things that we don't understand. Well, I understand. I feel like I have a deep understanding. I understand. It's very easy to understand what constitutional damages are, but I think intuitively I get constitutional damages, right? So constitutional damages were first awarded. Well, I don't know if it was first awarded, but most famously awarded in the case of say not Komape, and was that the
Not the child with the toilet, but remember.
No, I'm talking about the one with the mental health patients.
Oh wait, that's Life is Sidimeni.
Life is Sidimeni. That's the one I was thinking about. So that was the first famous case where constitutional damages were awarded, and it was the mental health patients that were treated so inhumanely, and their family, and they eventually ended up passing away, unfortunately, and then their family was awarded a different head of damages that was termed as constitutional damages. And as I understand it, but please correct me, those damages are mostly punitive, and given as a punitive measure against the hospital because of the drastic nature of the suffering.
Yeah, and also the sensitivity of that matter, because remember, that was like widely spread across media. It invoked such a reaction among societies to what actually happened in both those instances.
So let's say the insurer of the entity in that matter would never have reserved for constitutional damages, or could possibly not have foreseen that those type of damages were going to be awarded in that case. So then that gives that element of unpredictability to a claim where you don't know whether or not constitutional damages are going to be awarded. And I have seen the stance where certain insurers exclude constitutional damages. What's your take on that?
I find it unconstitutional.
It's unconstitutional to exclude constitutional damages. But I mean, to the defense of the insurer, they're doing it to kind of predict their risk better. Or
and if you think about it, right, if you've seen, for example, we chatted earlier about how punitive and emotional damages now comprises a way larger component in terms of the actual award, right? Where you had a 464 verdict given and 440. So I get it from that point, because these awards can be quite substantial. So I get where they would be coming from. But I'm just like, I'm like one of those, I want to fight the world and hug a tree
the world
type of person. And I strongly believe in advocacy of rights and things.
Of course,
So I find it a bit harsh, but that's my personal
You find it harsh that insurers exclude constitutional damages?
Yes, it may be a controversial opinion, but it's...
But on the other hand, Nads, and I'm just being devil's advocate here, why are constitutional damages awarded most of the time as a punitive measure, right? So is it necessary for your insurer to cover punitive because punitive damages are probably awarded against someone so that they feel the pinch because you were very naughty, now you must... So to ensure punitive damage.
But that's a good take on it. I mean, because rewarding...
But constitutional damages are not only punitive. Sometimes they are given when there's no other right of not recourse. What is it? Right of awarding a damage. When there's no other way to award the damages, you'll give the constitutional damage. So maybe it's more appropriate to say that insurers will exclude a constitutional damage only when it's punitive in nature.
Okay, but then obviously there needs to be that distinction in terms of where the court is heading to. But that's a good angle. Actually, I never would have thought about it in that way. Because I mean, fines and penalties are punitive measure, and it's acting in good faith to reward something like that. So smart, right? But I also think if you think about like the other drivers and things like that, but it's also now litigation, the experts and attorneys are more on point now, the other side, because now they're getting proper experts. They kind of like making sure that they have a proper claim. So they're going in all out. And I think that's also another driver. So now we know that, legal teams are doing their thing with the sophistication in terms of tactics and experts, but there's also the economic drivers, I think, and pressures.
And social inequalities.
But that's a big thing as well. But also, a lot of the time, when there's an insurer or someone else, you know that they are the ones with the deep pockets, and they're more likely to actually pay out.
I mean, when there's an insurer on the other side, you're going to go guns blazing for them, right? Because they have as you said, they have the deep pockets. And then there was a trend, possibly in the recent past, where insurers would simply settle rather than having to go all the way.
So imagine now, like we sit with a problem, right? There needs to be like this balance in terms of how those decisions are actually made, right?
It needs to be, because I mean, it's all good and well giving an excessive award to somebody,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, if those awards are given consistently, well, I wouldn't say consistently, if they are given frequently, then you actually price the risk out of the market. Then your insurer is no longer wanting to insure you.
Yeah, and they become a lot more selective, but I think it also presents a bigger problem because now you're going to have an insured
Yeah,
that's probably not going to be able to actually afford the insurance.
yeah,
And I don't think any business or any professional in today's day and age can go without any type of, whether it's PI, cyber, or whatever insurance. You
yeah.
need to make sure that you have your coverage.
So it's, for instance, what happened to gynecologists and obstetricians, right? You don't have them. There was a point where it was pretty difficult for
Yeah.
them to get insurance because their insurance was priced so out, right?
And that's a scary reality because sometimes you think about it, there are certain professionals and organizations that you do need
Yeah,
within the society so that everything, the ecosystem keeps
exactly,
moving. Like imagine
exactly.
not having a qualified gynae.
Oh my God, I remember now. It's when I was
That was
pregnant with my when I was pregnant with my first child. Halfway through, my gynae dropped me, and it was said they can't afford the insurance anymore, so they're going out of gynecology and going straight into fertility. And you can't afford to have a society like that where professionals are just dropping out because they can't afford insurance anymore.
And that's, I mean, like, there's a bigger societal impact, right?
Yeah,
Because now that compromises healthcare or standard of service that you're getting within the society and our
yeah,
economy as a whole.
yeah,
Because if you want to pitch yourself as this front runner as a country, you need to have that expertise or your services and things like this that are
exactly,
efficiently working.
exactly.
And I think with reinsurers, obviously they have like this big radar watching what's going on around the world. I
Yeah.
mean, that's going to affect the pricing, then also the capacity.
Yeah.
And they may also think, hey, this is maybe not our cup of tea as well.
Of course, of course. So how is it relative in the claim space, right? There's volatile verdicts.
Yeah.
As a claim specialist, you are now in uncharted territory. You need a strategy, and you can't just have the excuse, listen, we don't know what's going to happen. We're just going to go in there, guns blazing, and see what happens. What is the
Riding in the
strategy?
dark.
What is the way forward?
Yeah.
What is the cycle time? Should there be kind of a cutoff to say, I'm taking this matter so far,
Yeah.
and at this point, if it's not going in my direction, I'm going to cut it off.
Yeah, re-navigate.
Yeah.
Or, have that backup plan, a
Yeah.
contingency plan. Because
Yeah.
I remember when I started off in liabilities, one of the first things that I was ever taught about claims, you need to have a strategy.
Yes.
And Shakira says.
Shakira? Oh,
Shakira
Shakira the
says-
singer. Yeah.
Hannibal was a tactician. But
Are we talking about Shakira the singer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hannibal was a tactician, but Alexander the Great was a strategist. So you
Mhm.
want to be a strategist.
Exactly.
So you see, it does play in.
Yeah.
It can have a major impact on the outcome of a claim,
Yeah.
and also it impacts again ecosystems.
I think the advent of social inflation, nuclear verdicts, volatile verdicts really highlights how a claim specialist needs to be strategic. It's a key skill for a claim specialist, because if you don't have that strategic mind, you're not going to be able to roll with the punches.
Yeah, or re-navigate if there's a loophole or there's like a little pothole in the road. You need to be able to
Yes.
navigate that path.
And at this stage, we don't know where the punch is coming from.
And remember, think about it, there's a lot on the line because if you don't handle something properly,
Yeah.
apart from the bottom line being impacted, it's the reputational risk for the insurer. You're going to
Yeah.
sit with an insurer that's just going to be like, I'm cancelling.
Cancel you.
I'm taking you
cancelled.
to the ombud. It's all those
Yeah.
factors that play in.
Yeah.
It's the how you do things, how you communicate with your clients, the expectations that's leveled, whether
Yeah.
it's with third parties, insureds, whoever.
So when you're selling liability insurance now, you're going to have to sell that promise of not just a person that's sitting behind the desk and asking you 10,000 questions. You're going to have to sell that promise of a person that's sitting behind the desk and can really understand
Yeah.
the global impact of claims right now.
Yeah, a global context is so important because I think here's the thing, right? And what really grates my onions is when people have this thing. Let's just think of our context only. You can't in insurance. You can't think of things
You
in
can't.
only our context.
And at the end of the day, whatever is happening overseas eventually
Yeah.
is gonna leak over this side. And before, whereas it used to take maybe a few years for us to get on the train, now it's happening almost instantaneously because, as you said, there's social media, there's there's that cultural exchange,
Shift,
global
yeah.
exchange, global shift. People sharing ideas all the time. This kind of like smorgasbord of an insurance community, not just an insurance community, communities in general.
Yeah, people.
So you're going to whatever is trending overseas is trending here at this time. We can't afford to be on the back foot. Yeah,
It's happening. So you never want to be like, for example, the classic example was COVID, right?
Right.
Everybody thought it's just going to be confined to a certain area.
I thought that, Nats. When you told me COVID is going to close us down, I was like, this woman, she needs a
Why is she telling me to buy? Why is she telling me to stock up on toilet paper? I know that's what you were telling me. But it happens.
Yeah.
Things happen, and you must always think of things in insurance in the context of a global village.
Yes.
Because think about it. Also, tariffs.
Yes.
Whilst there may be tariffs that are impacting certain countries, it's impacting our very own professionals here.
Yes.
In terms of their supply chains and agreements and all those things.
So, I mean, it becomes a different ball game now from just being up to date with what happened in the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. Is it in Bloemfontein? In Bloemfontein. You need to be...
what happened here?
You
what
need to be
there?
aware of what happens around the world because it's going to impact you.
And like you said, social media, digitization, information spreads faster than the speed of light. Once people know about something, they'll be like, hey, I had a similar situation. And nowadays also, you know that there are people that are willing to advocate for you. With
Yes.
the options, as we mentioned, like litigation funders, attorneys that are working on a contingency basis, or just like general activists, human rights groups
Yes.
that are like more in tune now with what's happening. But also our regulators, I think, are also becoming a lot more in tune with what's happening to people
Yes.
and communities and consumers.
Yeah. And rightly so. Rightly so. Because I think for a very long time people were marginalized. In a way that wasn't fair. I mean, just because somebody has money to be able to fight you, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't get your due
Representation,
yeah.
be fair.
Yeah,
and
be
I mean,
fair.
that is the principles and the basis of our constitution.
Exactly.
And it's not just now, I mean, that attitude is not just lying here in South Africa, but globally, if you think about it.
And I think companies that kind of close their eyes to that shifting mentality are really going to find themselves losing a lot of money. They're gonna have a huge hole in their boat before they realize that they're sinking.
Because remember something also, nowadays insurers are also moving towards global shifts of ethical thinking.
Yes.
Because they know the impact on their business, their brand, their image, their reputation.
Yeah.
So everybody needs to get onto that. There's a global shift we need to acknowledge. And now we need to look at how do we navigate the way forward. But I also think, what else do you think we can do in terms of, so we noticed like in claim, we said the claims, you need to have a strategy, but what about legal partnerships?
So how important is it to partner with the correct attorneys in curbing the effects of social inflation?
Remember something, when you have a matter, depending on the line, you need to have the right expert.
Right.
On a cyber matter, for forensics, are you going to call someone that doesn't have cyber or forensic expertise?
No, of course not. Yeah.
So I think the most important thing, making sure whatever matter you do have, is that you have the right foot for the matter, the person with that actual knowledge and expertise on how to deal with it. That's the first thing. But also, you need to be cost conscious in terms of the fees.
But I think I also think that maybe it's important for insurance brokers to kind of know what understanding their panel of attorneys has of social inflation factors.
Yeah.
Because if you have a firm that is kind of not considering social inflation factors, then I think you know that you have a bit of a problem there, because there must be a firm that you must be partnering with people that are able to read the room, as we said earlier.
Yeah, so basically it's that alignment again.
Yes, because if you're gonna have someone that says, listen, precedent has said this for the past 10 years, and the Constitution says this, and I know I'm right, and I'm going to stick by it, and we're going to go all the way to
You're gonna have a problem.
the moon and back, you're going to have a problem, because if that person can't see the public sentiment aspect of it as well, that's going to be a huge problem. You're going to end up paying
Double
you're
or
going to end
triple?
up paying double. And I
Yeah.
mean, what are legal costs now? You can easily pay up to $1 billion in legal costs.
You know what? A limit can be eroded quite quickly in terms of legal costs. So
A
you
limit
need
can
to,
be eroded quickly in terms of legal costs. And how is that fair to your client at the end of the day?
That's why it's the right partnerships. It's the
Yeah.
right match for the matter, because you can't just go in and not be. That's, I think, the most reassuring thing is when you have an expert that is aware of what's happening as well, like you said.
Yeah.
If they don't know about these concepts, if they don't understand or they don't take it into account, it's going to be a bigger problem in the end.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, insurance is about looking at unforeseen situations, right?
Yes.
And we're in a field where there's emerging risks that are emerging consistently, a new trend. So you need to be jacked up.
Yeah.
So it's not just an insurer, but everybody in that ecosystem that's part of this product offering. They all need to be on the same webpage.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we'd like to think that we have good partnerships with attorneys, right?
Yeah.
So these are concepts that you can easily discuss with them and put it on the table and say, listen, this is how this is affecting our bottom line. What is your solution?
What is the strategy? How do we navigate through this so that we know that there's an outcome where everybody benefits? Because that's important.
That is important, and it's only that collaboration that's going to really give us some kind of tools to deal with social inflation issues.
But I also think it gives that insurer that's adopting an approach a very competitive edge. Think about it. There's a lot of competition in the market, right?
Yeah.
You do know now there's insurers that are offering cover on certain lines that they never were involved in.
Of course, yeah.
Right? So there's a diverse playing field right now. So you do want to make sure that you want to have that competitive edge. And this is something that speaks to that.
Yeah. That is true. And I think that why is that diversification? Because people feel that probably specialist insurers are not giving much more of a different edge to what other insurers are. So you can just as well offer the same service.
But think about it, it's human psyche, right? We want the best of what we can get.
Yeah.
So if you come with an insurer that can do something better for you and at a good value, you're going to go with them.
Yeah.
And I think with businesses and professionals, there's a lot more on the line than anything else.
Mm-hmm. I think you also look at it from an attorney's point of view, where an uncharted territory here, you don't know what the judge is actually going to say, right? So you need to be thinking on your feet and preparing, and obviously that costs millions for an attorney to do. I agree. There should be SLAs in place. There should be an agreement beforehand. Let's just make it that. Let's just put it that way. How you navigate that?
It's going to be tricky, but
I don't want to be fired by my attorney friends here.
We come in peace.
I don't want to be cancelled.
We come in peace, guys. But it's interesting things to think about. How do we all navigate it? Because also, if you think about it in terms of C-suite, right, or upper management, or management for that matter, it's how do they then, given that there's this shift in societal expectations, and this uncertainty, what about their decision making? There needs to be better decision making
from the C-suite
or anybody in it.
Yeah.
That's sitting in those chairs.
There has to be governance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what about like now also government intervention in terms of what is it? What do you think? Should they be stepping in to actually see how they can curb or regulate or?
Well, if you look at those mid-mal stats for state mid-mal claims,
120 billion.
Well, there was that kind of intervention, wasn't there? Not something about but that was for future medical expenses where they so that's nothing to do with social inflation. I don't know. What do you think?
I think they actually should. Again, with everything that evolves, does require some kind of regulation. Even like with the litigation funding and stuff like that, they do need more of those regulations.
Yeah, I mean, some claims should definitely be kept. I think in some instances there should be guidelines as to what should be awarded.
And I think here's the difficulty. It's getting that balance right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to make a hand down a settlement which sets a precedent, or it's a non-meritorious claim, or a person's getting a lot more.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, we've had situations where people were getting these, for minor injuries, we're getting the higher type of settlements, and then you get people with severe injuries getting the lower end of the stick.
Yeah.
So it's that balancing, but also taking into account the social impact and the societal expectation. It's going to be a difficult one, but I do think if there's thought given to it, it is something that can be navigated through.
It is, and it's a huge project, but it's something that somebody has to embark on, unless we end up as like the USA, giving out huge awards for non-meritorious claims.
And I think the rubber stamping thing is going to be something that's going to bite everybody.
Yeah.
There needs to be some kind of balance. What are you actually paying for? Because now it takes away like concepts of technical valuation and the quantum of damages and all those things we've always relied on.
Yeah. And I mean, it hits us in the economy, right? Because local businesses may not necessarily, I mean, we talked about how legal costs can probably erode a limit. And so if you go over limit and you have to pay out of your pocket, that could close a business down just by virtue of the fact that you're paying a claim that is so inflated.
So it's always those ripple effects that we need to actually keep in mind.
Yeah.
It's so important.
So I think what we get from this discussion is that claims teams need to identify claims that have a potential to be a nuclear risk.
Yeah.
Right? Early. So you would look at your emotionally charged claims, your claims with multiple claimants, your claims that have high media attention.
Yeah, that's definitely something.
They should actually, well, we'll give free advice here. They should actually be a register for, or your system should actually flag claims that have the potential to go nuclear. If you're using the right technology, then not Excel but other technologies, then you should be able to
flag it.
Yeah.
Identification is key.
Yeah.
But then, once you've identified, it's not just a claims issue. There needs to be that underlining alignment with underwriting as well and relevant business heads so that they know what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, agree. That's always so important.
Yeah, it's so important. Communication is key, I think, again, in terms of how does everybody navigate this space?
Yeah. So the cost of underhandling claims now exceeds, we know this, right? The cost of underhandling a claim exceeds the cost of using the appropriate expert, right? Why do people underhandle claims? Just to save costs in the short term.
I think sometimes they feel, it's a case of, like you said, trying to save that cost or thinking that they're getting the best outcome. I've always felt that you need to be very hands-on. You need to make sure that, okay, how do we handle this?
I mean, for instance, right? So we know we go through the phases of a claim. You get probably a circumstance, then you get a letter of demand, then you get a summons. But I noticed that if you do not handle a claim properly if you do not set expectations appropriately at circumstance stage,
it starts there.
If you just kind of ignore it, and if you get all the way to summon stage and it's not properly handled, those are the claims that are more likely to blow up.
No, 100%. And like I said, managing expectations all around, understanding what could be the potential. Because remember something, when you get a circumstance, because I know a lot of people will be like, oh, it's just a circumstance.
Yeah.
But the amount of information that you can actually gather from a circumstance can be so beneficial, not just to the claim, for the claims handler, but also for underwriting.
Yeah. And I mean, once you annoyed a person enough to have to go to an attorney, right? A plaintiff, that is. Once you annoy a plaintiff enough to go to an attorney, they're not going to, sometimes they can be like a dog with a bone, and they're not going to let it go so as easily as they would have if you had circumvented at the beginning of the matter.
And then it speaks again to remember the soft skills and the approach.
Yeah.
Because how you're approaching certain things.
Yeah.
Far too often we've seen like certain complainants that are just like, we're going to proceed out of principle, or just go for it, or they have a lot of money, or they just want to pursue something out of that.
Yeah. And it also gives you an opportunity to control the narrative.
Yeah.
I think effective claims handling definitely does come, and prevention of, I mean, once you get to the stage where your social inflation factors come into play, it becomes very difficult to control the narrative.
It's hard. It's
Yeah.
tough because you're basically reacting now on a back foot.
You are. You are. You don't know where you're going. And I mean, I think if at the get go, the early intervention is so, so key.
I totally agree. Like I
Yeah.
said, you never just misjudge a circumstance for being a circumstance, because a circumstance could end up being a potential liability.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it's not managed appropriately at the get go.
And I mean, insurers as well, not in certain cases, the way an insurer handles a claim, or the way an insurer treated a third party at the beginning stage does have an effect on what the judge ultimately decides. There have been certain cases where insurer communication has been included in the pleadings to motivate for higher awards. So it's not like you can just treat people however you feel like anymore, or disrespectfully. You should never treat people disrespectfully anyway, but some people do, and that is having an impact.
It's kind of like having that leverage over the person to say we're in the position of power, and then we can just roll with the matching.
It's also people feel like it's a negotiating tactic. If you come in powerfully, bulldozing, then you're just going to make a person go away. But as you said, people are very much more aware of their rights.
They're much more aware.
Yeah.
I think, and also people are less tolerant to just merely accept certain things these days. If you've spoken to me in a certain way, they're going to be like, hey, no, this is unacceptable.
Yeah.
So it definitely, how you start off in the beginning sets the tone of the outcome. And a lot of the times you find you get a lot of third parties that are willing to listen and understand, but it's how you communicate and what you relay. And again, all communication is always via email. So if you're going to go in with that bulldozing approach or in a disrespectful manner, you're just providing the third party with more evidence to use against you, and it will be used against you.
No, it will be used against you. And you have to kind of be the adult in the situation.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it can be very tempting to get caught in a mudslinging.
Yeah.
Someone came to you and said, you know what, you are really terrible, and because of you, and they come at you kind of in this rebellious way, and then you want to be rebellious in return. But then you just lose sight of the goal, the end goal.
That's the thing, and I think the energy is then spent on the wrong thing instead of like let's look at a way how we can amicably resolve the situation and do what's right.
You have to be collaborative, and I mean I'll stand on the soapbox forever. I think early settlement is such a cost saver.
100%.
I think if you're going to feel like you're going to go in there and show somebody a point and take it to court and be in court for 10 years, in this day and age with the technology and with the resources and the expertise that we have, it should be very far and few where you being 10 years in court or.
Yeah, and I mean, think about it, for insurers, it's a great way to get those liabilities off their books. The matter is done and dusted.
Yeah.
Let's focus on what's next.
You're not sitting with a 3 billion rand reserve for the next 10 years. You're getting it out of the way, you're getting it sorted. And it leads to confidence, because your insurers are confident that you can get a matter resolved quickly and that there's no stress involved for the next 10 years.
Because, I mean, think about it. For example, imagine a director being involved in litigation, having something hang over his head for 10 years.
Yes, it's a lot. Sure.
Or a doctor, or a professional. I mean, and then you still expect him to focus like normally or perform normally, but then you have this thing hanging over your head.
Yeah.
It's quite stressful also.
No, it is very stressful. Yeah.
So if anything, we know that social inflation is here to stay, and it's not something that is temporary. It's basically reflecting the way the world views justice, fairness, and that global shift is here in South Africa. And I think if anything, we have to realize the insurers basically that will succeed are those that are not ones that are just going to raise the premiums. These are the insurers that are going to invest in strategic claims handling, specialist experts, and also those stronger legal partnerships in order to actually navigate through this uncertain path. From our point of view, we've always maintained that where there's so much of this uncertainty and social instability or a global shift, your claims excellence is going to be something that's going to actually set that insurer apart. So thank you for joining us. Until our next session, take care. Bye.